Okay, so we're going to create a Pong game, and we've got a list of the objects that we want. That includes ball, paddles, score boxes, some buttons to control things. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a ball and have it move. So we can paint to do that, or we could just use an ellipse out of the supplies bin. But we're going to choose to paint one. So I'm going to bring up the paint palette. I'm going to go to the perfectly round tool, but you can draw a circle if you'd like. Or you could just click once with the paint tool and you'll get a dot. So I'm going to hold down Shift so I get a perfect circle. And maybe I want to fill the center of it, maybe not. I'm going to keep it. And now I've got my first object. I'm going to rely on you to slow me down if I'm going too fast. So now we're going to call it ball because otherwise we're going to have a bunch of different objects in here. We don't want to say when sketch 1 hits sketch 2, then execute script 4, because that will have no meaning to us. So here's our ball, and let's open up a viewer for it. And we already know how to give it a basic motion of going forward. So let's just call this move. And already we can start it going, and it's ticking, and it's going up and down. We can make it more smooth by changing the ticking rate. Oh, it's stuck. Any thoughts on what we can do here? Well, you may remember there's a tile called bounce, which will make it bounce off the edges of the screen. And so I searched for bounce in the viewer, and now if I put that in, now it's going to bounce. So this seems to satisfy the bouncing requirement. Why is it only going up and down instead of all around? Well, because its initial heading was 0, so it's doing the right thing. If I change its heading to something like 37, now it looks like it's doing something like what a Pong ball would do. Notice it looks like it's going in a sort of a jerky, lurching fashion. That's because I'm going forward 5 steps at a time. So I might want to make that a little bit smaller, and I'll get a smoother looking motion. It may be moving jerkily because I'm recording this, and that's occupying some of the processor's energy and brains. Okay, one thing that we didn't mention was that we actually are going to isolate the action of the game into a playfield, which will be our court. So that we'll have scripts off on one side while we're developing, and we'll have a smaller area, which will be the playfield. So pull out a playfield from the supplies bin and resize it to a happy size. Oops. I'm going to move this over. Maybe something like that. And now take your ball, you can grab it, and put it into the playfield, and it should bounce off the playfield because the playfield accepts drops. That means that when you put something on top of it, it now becomes sort of part of it, inside of it. So now I've got a little Pong court, and my ball is doing just the right things. Okay. Do we need another moment, or does everyone have a ball bouncing in a Pong court? Oh, I'm going to rename this playfield Pong. My ticking rate is 50. Maybe I should make it 100. It doesn't go too much faster because I think it's kind of maxed out. I think I'm just going to make it go more steps at a time. Okay. So can we move on? Good. All right, so now let's make a paddle. Now, we're going to start, the paddle's going to have, well, we need to make the ball bounce off the paddle. We can't do that until the paddle exists. So we need to make the paddle. It turns out that it will make sense to make one paddle and do everything with it first before we create the other. That way, when we create the other as a copy, it will get all of the same script, so we won't have to do the same thing, all over again. Right? So the controls for having the paddle go up and down, for example, having the ball bounce off the paddle, putting all of that in place, and then creating the second paddle. So I'm going to just grab a rectangle out of the supplies bin, and that's going to be my paddle. And I'm going to resize it to what looks like a reasonable paddle size. And I'm going to call this lefty. That's my left player. That's good. And we'll have a choice later whether to make the left paddle, the right paddle different colors. And it turns out it'll be easier if we leave them the same color, because we're going to have the ball bouncing off of them, and we'll have the ball test whether it hits the paddle by the color. So we can get by with one test if the paddles are the same color. Okay, so now we want the default action of the paddle. And so let's bring out a forward by script for the paddle. And we'll just call this move. And do we want it bouncing up and down, or do we want it to get stuck at the top if the user hasn't changed its direction? So that's a design choice. I'm going to have mine bounce, but you can have yours get stuck. And I'm going to make this go a little bit faster. Whoops. So that's the basic motion of my paddle. So far, so good. So now we can program the paddle to go up and down by our keystrokes. So we have another option here. Do we want one key that makes it change its heading to going up, and another key that changes its heading to going down? For example, the A and the Z on the keyboard, or the up and the down arrows respectively. Or do we want a single key which toggles its direction? If you have this bounce feature, then, well, actually it doesn't matter. So regardless of whether or not you're bouncing, you could go with either of those two options. Toggle direction, or make direction up, make direction down. So, toggle easier, but it's not a big. I'll show both, but we'll just do one. Okay, so let's do a toggle of direction. So how do we do that? Any thoughts? We need to select a key, but we need a test, right? We need a test to test whether or not the key, whatever that key is, has been hit. So we're going to grab a test. And so if you bring up a viewer for the Pong game, and search for input, or actually just search for keystroke, you'll get Pong's last keystroke as a tile. And what you want to do is you want to check whether Pong's last keystroke, that's your test, is Pong's last keystroke equal to the character that's going to toggle the direction. Now we're going to have two paddles, a left paddle, a left player, and a right paddle, a right player. It makes sense to give the left guy a key on the left side of the keyboard and the right guy a key on the right side of the keyboard. So I'm going to use A and comma, or A and L, or Z and slash, or do what you like. I'm going to use an A for this one. That's going to toggle. And what should the command be here next to the S? I'm going to move this over here so it doesn't get covered up when I'm when I've got the viewer open. So when the last keystroke is A, what should it do? Change direction. How do we do that? How do we change its direction?
Add 180 to.
Excellent. We'll add 180 to its heading, or we could multiply its heading by -1. Either of those will work. And so to change its heading, we're going to drag out lefty's heading, not by this, not from here, which will get its value, but from the arrow, which will let us make a change to the variable, lefty's heading. And now, instead of setting it to 0, we're going to increase by, or decrease by, or multiply by. Any of those will work. You just need the right number. So I'm going to increase by 180. And now if I hit the A, oh, it works.
Did you rename the word as a Pong? Or
Did I rename what?
where did you get the Pong style?
Oh, I'm sorry. That I renamed the playfield to be Pong. All right, so when this is running now, you may notice that the paddle is now stuck. If you did what I did, and you hit the A key, or whatever key you chose, the paddle now is sort of vibrating. So why?
Because last keystroke is A, so it's keep talking.
Right, exactly. The last keystroke, where is the last keystroke? I can bring up the Pong's viewer here. And see, the last keystroke is A. If I hit some other key, like F, the last keystroke is no longer A, and it will continue. But as soon as I hit A, the last keystroke becomes A, and so it changes its heading, and then it goes up, and it's doing the script over and over again, repeatedly changing its direction. So this is a problem. We don't want, well, one solution is to tell the person who's playing, if you want to change direction, hit A, then quickly hit another key. Okay, not a good solution. All right, so here, AD, there, okay, so, but that's ridiculous. So what we can do instead, and we saw this trick earlier when we looked at tricks for games and keyboard input, is we ourselves within the program can change the last keystroke so that it's no longer D, or sorry, so it's no longer A. And the way we do that is we grab the arrow key next to Pong's last keystroke, and we set it to some character or sequence of characters that are not likely to be hit. So I usually just type in garbage. And so what this does is, if you hit an A, it changes its direction, and then it resets the last keystroke to be Sivjden. So now I can hit an A, and if you watch here, look at the last keystroke, you'll see it momentarily go to A and then suddenly go back to this nonsense. Well, maybe you won't see that, it just happens too darn fast. Okay, so now I'm toggling the paddle. Okay. So far, so good. I'm going to pause to let everybody catch up. Excellent. So what do we do next? Let's take a look at what we decided. What are the behaviors of the ball? Well, do we have anything left to do with the paddle? Does the paddle do anything else besides that? Goes up and down, changes its direction when we hit a key. I think that's it. Unless we wanted, as we mentioned earlier, to have it, to have it move forward and back to charge the net, but no one ends up using that because it makes it, turns out to be a bad strategy, at least in Pong. So let's go back to the ball, and let's get the ball to bounce off the paddle. So I'm going to bring over here the ball's move script. And what do I want to do? Any thoughts on what I'm going to do to get the ball to hit the paddle, to bounce when it hits the paddle? I need a test. Whenever you hear the word when, we want something to happen when, that means we need a test to test when something happens. And let me stop the ball.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you pull a test out of any viewer and throw it into anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
They're
the tests are not specific to the objects. So, okay, so yeah, so if you have some other viewer open, you can pull a test out from that, but you can always pull a test out from the script header,
Oh, that's right.
and that's the easiest place to find them. Okay, so now we've got a test. We're going to test the condition ball's color sees, or we could test whether the ball is overlapping the paddle, or overlaps any paddle, but I'm going to use the color sees because usually that's the first thing that people learn, and we may as well use it until the cows come home. Okay, so I'm going to change the color. This looks like the same red, doesn't it? Maybe. Dangerous. So kids may think, oh, look, the red's already there, but no, it could be, one bit different red. So I'm going to select that red. And now when it sees the lovely pale blue of the paddle, what do I want it to do? So everyone is tempted to say ball bounce there. Ball bounce is kind of a weird command. All it really does is tell the ball to bounce against the edges of the container that it's in. So it's not something that you can use except just for the general bouncing around the edges of the screen. So we're going to need to program in our own what should the ball do. And that's going to involve changing the ball's heading somehow. And so now we need to put on our geometry thinking caps and figure out what that should be. So I'm going to pause here and let any viewer of the video figure out on their own. Let me suggest that they imagine the ball coming in at certain angles and ask what are the outgoing angles and see if they can find a pattern. And we'll do that ourselves. Okay, so we just saw that the angle going out after it hits a paddle is the negative of the angle going in, or it's 360 minus the angle going in. Both of those are the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the heading of the ball to be -1 times its current heading. So let's find the ball's heading, and there it is. And do I grab it by this tile, or do I grab it by the green and white arrow? By the green and white arrow, because I'm going to change it. If I just want to use the value, I grab only the name, but I want to change it, so I'm going to grab the whole thing. Oh, I want to get rid of this ball bounce silence, because as we saw earlier, that doesn't do anything. And now I change this to say multiply by, and I'm going to put a -1 there. And let's see if that works. Oh, look at that. Woohoo! I'm in business. It works going one direction. It works going the other direction. Now here's something bizarre. Wait for it, hold on. Oh, look at that. Did you see that?
Oh.
Why is it doing that? The reason it's doing that is because it's hitting on a horizontal surface instead of a vertical one. And the pattern that we observed about angle in is, or angle out is negative of the angle in, that's only true for vertical surfaces. If we did that same pattern, recognition, if we made that same table of angles in and out for horizontal surfaces, we would get a different function, right? And so what can we do here? Well, one thing we could do is if we had colored this ourselves, we could have colored the, that wouldn't have worked. Yeah, we could have colored the two ends. No, that wouldn't have worked. I was going to suggest we color the two ends different colors, but then you could still hit those ends from the side as well. So the way to get rid of this is to make your pad a little bit more narrow, if you can, or to live with it. So we're going to live with it. Just an artifact of some of the limitations. I mean, we can get around it, but it's just more complicated. And so I think it would, to get around this would bring more, too many complications into the game. The other thing you can do is position your paddle so close to the back edge that if that starts to happen, you probably have a scoring event anyway, and it would just stop and reserve. So, okay, so now if I get both of my scripts going, let's see if I can, oh no. Let's see if I can make this work.
Ball size is
Yeah, I have a large paddle, small. It might be helping me out.
Okay, so good. So we have half of the Pong game except for all the accoutrements like, a score and basically scoring. We need another paddle. So this would be a good time to create another paddle. So the way we do that is we just hit bring up a viewer bring up a halo rather, for the first paddle, and you can just grab and make a copy. In this case, I don't think it matters. Oh no, you don't want a sibling in this case. And this is discussing the difference between siblings and copies is beyond the scope of this little tutorial, but you just accept my word for it that what you want here is a copy. And we create the copy. And let's call the copy righty. And if we bring up a viewer now for righty, we'll see that it's got a move script. And all we need to do is change this A, the keystroke test, to some other character. I'm going to use a comma. That's sort of the last key on the same row that A is. It'll give me separation from, oh no, that's a single quote, rather. Okay. And now if I set that going, I should be able to change its direction. Oh, look at that. Where's it gone? Why is it doing that? Is yours doing that too? So does anyone have any thoughts on why this is doing that? It doesn't seem to be bouncing. And the reason is I didn't insert it into the playfield. So it is bouncing off the edges of the container that it's in, and the container that it's in is the whole world. So I need to grab it and put it into the playfield, and now it ought to bounce properly. Okay. So good. So now if I move these scripts and start everybody going, I have two paddles and one ball, and the ball bounces off the paddles. So far, so good. Okay, I'm going to pause and make sure everyone's caught up. Oops. Okay, good. So we decided that a way to check when the ball has hit the either side and triggered a scoring event is to simply lay down a couple of colored objects at each end. Let me stop everything. And this is a good time to show you something that you might find useful. If you go to the supplies bin, there's something called all scripts. And if you pull that out, you can use it to make every script that is paused to start ticking, and to stop, or rather to pause every script that was ticking. And so that's a useful tool to use while you're developing. Some final projects include this, but I like to have finer control over exactly which scripts are going to start and which scripts are going to stop and so on. And sometimes this can also be confusing because if a script is in the normal state and you click go, it doesn't start going. It's only the paused scripts which start going, and that can confuse some kids and adults as well. Okay, but for now, it's, since we're developing, this is a nice tool to have around. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring out another rectangle. This is gonna be the left edge. I'm gonna make it long, and let me move my paddle away from it. And I'm going to give it a different color. And I'm going to call it left edge or something. Maybe I'm going to call it right goal. Yeah, because that's the goal for the right guy. And my code will read better. When the ball hits the right goal, then the right guy gets the score. Rather than when the ball hits the left goal, then the right guy gets the score. Or is this confusing to call the one on the left the right goal?
Yeah, that might.
That's confusing. Righty goal. Goal one. Do whatever you'd like. I'm going to call mine righty goal. And then make a copy of it and move it over to the right side. And I'm going to call that one lefty goal, because that's the goal for lefty. And you need to recolor that because we need to check which side has been hit. And you can put it like right at the very edge. And now, when the ball is hitting the red, something should happen. And when it hits the green, something should happen. So if we go to the ball's move script, we're going to create two tests. Test and test. And I'll bring up a viewer for the ball. And I want to test whether or not the ball's color sees in each case. And I want to set that color to the ball's color. And if the ball sees this red color, something should happen. You know what? I'm going to change this paddle's color because it looks like the ball's color, and it's a little confusing if you're viewing the instructions online. Okay, so now if the ball sees the blue color, something's going to happen. And if the ball sees the green color, something else is going to happen. What's going to happen? Scores should increase. We don't have scores, but they should increase. Ball should stop moving. Return to the center. So we could have the ball return to the center. Why don't we do that at the moment? And we'll create scores also in a moment. So how do we get the ball to return to the center? We said it's X and Y. So here's something we're going to do. I'm going to create a script called serve. And that's going to do it. And so I'm not going to have the X and the Y in here, because when I read it, it's going to say balls X do this, balls Y do that, then this paddle do this, and then start this. And it's going to get too long and confusing. But serve, I understand. It's a very simple word. And now I can just put the word serve in there. Right, so I'm making little modules, and serve is one such module. And its main purpose is to get the ball to move back to the center. So where's the center? Now, the origin is where? The lower left. And so the center is is half the playfield's width, comma, half the playfield's length. We can actually get tiles that say half the, that say playfield's length and playfield's width and divide those by 2 so that if somebody resizes the playfield, it'll still go to the center. Instead of hard coding the actual coordinates. But the other thing we could do is reset the playfield center to be 0, 0 instead of the lower left corner. So I'll show you how to do that, origin at center. So if you right click on the playfield and look at the little white menu up at the top in the halo, let's see, where is it? Playfield options, I believe, down at the bottom. If you click there, you can find origin at center. Perfect. So I'm going to darken that box. And now 0, 0 is exactly the center. So now I can say balls x, in my serve script, balls x become 0, balls y become 0, and we might want to use this serve script in some other script. For example, when the game starts, we're going to need a script that starts the game, and serving is going to be something we're going to do. So probably we should put into the script a command that starts the ball moving. Right? It's already moving, right, if we're in the middle of playing the game, and serving is just putting it back to the center. But let's start the script ball move so that serving will make sure that ball move script is ticking. Does that make sense, or does that seem superfluous?
We want serve to start it?
Well, what is serve?
I thought just return to the center. Like, so if your game would automatically start again after it hit the wall, like it would just go again. You would push something to start the serve again. Just go.
So right now, what happens if we leave it as is when the ball hits the wall? No, it keeps going. We didn't stop it.
Ticking.
Right.
I see.
But at the beginning of the game,
We want it to sit there to start.
and then do what?
And then go. So we just want button to fire the script, the move script.
Okay, so we could have a button to fire the move script would just have it tick once. So we want a button to start the move script ticking, or we really want a start button that sets the scores to 0, that puts the paddles in center positions, that puts the ball in the middle, and that starts everybody moving. So I'm thinking that it might be convenient to have the serve script make sure that the ball is moving. Otherwise, I'm going to call it reset ball or something, a reset, or center or something. So if you want, it doesn't matter which we do, but if we call it serve, to me, serve means it's a serve, it's going to go. Whereas, center yourself or reset means go to the middle.
So we want some sort of separate reset button later.
Right, we may.
Do we want to randomize the heading?
That's a good question. So do we want to randomize the heading? Or do we want to leave the heading exactly the same as it was? So for now, we're going to leave it just the way it was. Okay, and let me tell you what you'll end up with doing if you just simply set its heading to random 360.
Go up and down like mine.
Sometimes it might choose 3 as the heading. And then it's going to go up and down and up and down and up and down about many, many, many times before it finally ekes its way over to the right edge. So really what you want is it to choose an angle randomly, either between 45 and 135 or between -45 and -135, those two wedges.
You could just put a condition, right?
What you do is you flip a coin, you choose a random event, either 1 or 2. If it's a 1, then you choose a random heading between 45 and 135. And if it's a 2, then you choose a random direction between -45 and -135. And how do you choose a random number between that range? Well, we need to talk about it, and I don't want to. Right, because we want to get the Pong game done, right? Okay, and maybe we can come back to it. But yes, we probably do want to random serve, and we don't want it to be completely random. We may want to serve it to the person who just got the point, right? So that you just got the point, so we're going to give the loser a slight advantage here by making you take the serve. We could do that. In which case we can't put that in here, we'd have to put it somewhere else because this script doesn't know who just got the point. We might need to create a variable that says who just got the point. And then we could check that variable. Right? So if who got point equals 0, then serve in this direction. And if not, then serve in the other direction. So lots of different things that we haven't thought about, that we're thinking about now, but that we're not at the moment going to include in the project. So, so back here, I'm going to put in, and you don't need to, but something about me really wants to put in a start the move script for the ball in here, so that if it wasn't moving, it will start moving. So that way, at the beginning of the game, when I click the start button, one of the commands that will be executed is the serve command, and the ball will start moving. But you probably don't need that. Okay, so now, let's see what works. Let's give it a shot. I'm running out of real estate. Where'd that button go? Okay, I'm gonna collapse many of my scripts. Don't I have a, what did I do with that? All right, well, I'm gonna go get another one. Okay, go. And now when it hits, oh, look at that. Okay, so do you have something like this going?
Let me explain on your ball serve script, you've got it set at normal. Is that?
Yeah, so if I set this ticking, what's gonna happen?
I'll tell you, it keeps going back to the beginning.
Okay.
That's something that we don't want to be ticking. It's a fire once script. So some scripts are fire once scripts. We never want them ticking. They're meant to happen once and stop.
Right.
And other scripts are ones that we want happening continuously. You'd like the player to hit the serve button. You could do that. So for example, you could have a keystroke which executes the serve, maybe the space bar, and whoever lost the point gets to hit the space bar and let that start the serve script. Doesn't matter. Lots of different options. Okay. So what now? Let me pause here.